To be joined by the man, the myth, the legend himself from Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast, NBC Sports Boston, and everywhere else. When you talk Patriots, he is your guy. Tom E. Curran joins us, and of course, he's brought to you by Drains by James, Eastern Mass's top provider of drain and sewer cleaning and repair, by your New England Chevy dealers. Together, let's drive. And Tom Curran is powered, much like our beautiful studios here in Brighton, by Verizon. Tom E. Curran, how you doing?
I am on top of the world. How are you, Fitzy? Hi, Danny.
Hello. What's up, Tom?
Honestly, feeling great, Tom. This has been a really, really fun time of year because we've had, just as a general sports fan, we went right from all the way to the Super Bowl, and then the Olympics picked us up when we had a little bit of a drain or a sag after that. Rode that right into the World Baseball Classic, and now we've got March Madness and, of course, lots of football to talk with the draft a month away. It's not too bad, huh?
No, it's one of those high points of the year. This in early September, when everything in October, when everything is dovetailing, a confluence of sports, a cornucopia of activity.
I love the word confluence, by the way. That's one of my favorite words I don't use often enough. Speaking of which, there's a confluence of storylines, rumors, and whatnot that seem to be meeting at a head right now regarding A.J. Brown. Yesterday, we heard from Florio and Sims at PFT that the Rams may have been trying to move Devontae Adams for A.J. Brown, but they may have balked over looking at the knee. Now you've got, rampant sources and unverified blue check marks all over the place saying, "Oh, a deal is done. It's a June 1st done deal." And even Julian Edelman retweeting A.J. Brown's appearance on his podcast saying, "Oh, I'll be a Patriot," and winking and saying he was trolling. Tom, do you believe that there is a deal in place, or is this drama going to continue for weeks, if not months?
I haven't heard anybody tell me there's a deal in place, so it's hard for me to believe it. I mean, you're kind of throwing people at me and
yeah,
I have absolutely no concept of. So, no, I don't believe there's a deal in place. And if I thought that, I would have stated that. But I do believe that they have, as we said last week, left the light on for them. And they are, in a situation where it's a waiting game. What does Philadelphia want to do? The deal for Jalen Waddle, I think, does nothing to dissuade Philadelphia from sticking firmly to a first and a second request. Because, in essence, Waddle went for a first and a third. Not as good a player. Yeah, he might be, according to the medical reports, not ailing the same way that A.J. Brown is. But A.J. Brown was supposed to be ailing when he went to Philadelphia, and he keeps throwing up 1,000-yard seasons. So if I'm Philadelphia, I'm sitting there and saying, good player, first and a second, you want to do it. The X factor in this is whether or not A.J. Brown decides to go on a Wildcat strike sometime during OTAs or minicamps, and they say, well, actually, minicamp would be post-June 1st, so it will be easy then, but it will be easy for the Eagles to say, you know what, not working, let's move on. So regardless of what people proclaim now, I would just say what I know is if you look at what the Patriots are doing, if you look at what they're saying, if you look at what the two sides are, and don't get caught up in the cyclone of conversation that they're just continuing to get vomited out every day, they've left the light on for them.
Okay. The light remains on, and if that move does get made, obviously he becomes the crown jewel of your wide receiver room, adding in with Romeo Doubs and what you have. Kind of gives you a little bit of a log jam at the other end of the depth chart. So who are the guys that are fighting to make the roster in that scenario, and who fits the scheme versus who might be on the outside looking in?
If A.J. Brown comes aboard, I think your starters would look pretty good with Dobbs, Booty, and A.J. Brown. That will leave Demario Douglas and Kyle Williams. I think Kyle Williams would have the edge there. Demario Douglas is a great player. I really do think he's got great talent. Certainly has not been demonstrated statistically, but I think that he had a year with the McDaniels offense. I thought he was going to get many more touches. He did not. Diggs emerged, and as a result, I think that Demario Douglas really needs to somehow prove his worth. He's a terrific guy, terrific player, but the train is going to move forward, and he needs to make sure that he secures a seat on it. So that's just the knee jerk. If A.J. Brown came here, who would end up on the bubble? I would say Demario Douglas would be a likely candidate.
Tommy Curran from NBC Sports Boston, joining your old pal Nick Fitzy-Stevens and Dan Ball here on WEEI Afternoons. Tom, when you look at the free agency crop to date, what does the moves that they've made say? What do the moves they've made thus far say to you?
That the things that we perceive to be issues going in, they concur with. They understood that they had to get better at the wide receiver position. I thought that they should have sat on Diggs until they had resolution. On Brown, for instance, or Alec Pierce, they moved on with the plan already in place to go and get Dobbs. So that was obvious. Draymond Jones, we all understood that they needed to upgrade their pass rush. They did that with him. I think Jalen Hawkins is a really good player, but they saw an opportunity at the back end of their defense to upgrade with Kevin Byard. And then we could all tell that, it's interesting. I thought Garrett Bradbury had a good year, but when you looked at his Pro Football Focus numbers, pass protection was above average. Run blocking was not. And that's kind of borne out a little bit when Elliott Wolf spoke last week about the running game and its travails at different times. They were a productive team when you look at them statistically at the end of the year. Their overall average, I think, might have been 4.4. Henderson runs for 900 plus and however many touchdowns, 8 or 9. Stevenson has a pretty good year after his dip, but a lot of those were home run type runs. Stevenson over the last 5-6 weeks of the regular season had a few games where it was 8 carries, 55 yards, 8 carries, 45 yards. Long runs that kind of aided the notion that it was a better running game than it truly was. And I think a lot of that started in the middle of the offensive line. So moving Wilson over, hopefully for them, getting a healthy Elijah Vera Tucker, and that's hope against hope at this point. They can address that and make themselves better. And I also think having Tucker in between Campbell and Wilson will really lend some stability instead of having those two guys next to each other last year and trying to process things in a very, obviously, competitive league.
We just wrapped up our 3-point stance segment, and Fitzy brought up something related to Mike Vrabel, just feeling so comfortable about having him commanding the ship and having him be the guy that sets the tone and the culture and all the things that we've gushed about this season. Just based on your perspective watching this free agency play out, what was a bigger draw for the Patriots? Players coming to play for Mike Vrabel or coming to play with Drake May?
Biggest draw, I think, we got to be honest here. The biggest draw is always the money.
Fair.
Fair enough.
There's always money and opportunity.
Yeah.
First, start with that. That always is the biggest aspect. But then I think it's the draw. It's different for everyone. For Kevin Byard, it's to play with Vrabel and Vrabel's defense. He mentions May, but I think that May is obviously going to be a bigger draw for Romeo Dobbs. Romeo Dobbs looks at the landscape. He says, they discovered Stephon Diggs. This kid threw for 4,000-plus yards. He's only going to get better. Josh McDaniels is the offensive coordinator. I have a great opportunity to go from a 700-yard receiver to a 1,000-yard receiver. So I think his opportunity looks different. So I think it depends on the individual. Elijah Vera Tucker, probably his situation might be entirely different. Well, these guys are going to give me a per-game bonus that can get me up to a reasonable amount of money for where I should be given my talent, my draft status. I just haven't been able to get lucky. Well, if I get lucky or stop being unlucky, I can make all that money. So I think every guy has a different set of motivations, but they're all on the list. And I think that May and Vrabel were certainly primary draws in a way that, Bill and Mac Jones or Jacoby Brissett and Gerard Mayo had not been in past years.
Yeah, Tom, I was reading a piece the other day on ESPN from Bill Barnwell where he was discussing things other teams could still address in free agency before the draft. And he said he still is a little antsy about the Patriots' defensive line depth. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, a little bit. Losing Kyrus Tong is a big deal, in my estimation. They do have younger players who made contributions last year, but I think Tong is a big issue because he was very good when he was out there. So I don't disagree with the notion that they could get better on the defensive line. I mean, Draymond Jones can kick inside. I do think their defensive line as a group, and that includes the edges, it really needs to get more punch. Milton Williams is a Pro Bowl / All-Pro player. Barmore has Pro Bowl talent. Draymond Jones, a very, very good starter. But that's not enough, I think, right now to look at teams and say, well, they have a great defensive tackle combo, but how are we going to be able to throw against them? They need to get better on the defensive line, and I include the edges on that too.
On the same defensive side of the football, moving back a tad, you mentioned it, and it's true. You upgrade with Kevin Byard over Jalen Hawkins, adding him to Craig Woodson, and then your cornerback room had a pretty darn solid season from start to finish. That secondary group is pretty solid from beginning to end. Just how good are they? Would you agree with the sentiment that this secondary could be the best in the league? Or if you were finishing the sentence, their top blank, what number would you put there?
5.
5.
I would put them in the top 5. And I think they were there the other day. I wrote a story this week looking at that. And a lot of actually Pro Football Focus, again, to refer to them, they did a preseason ranking of the best secondaries. They had the Patriots at 5. And that was before Carlton Davis played a snap and before Marcus Jones played better. Do you know Carlton Davis was the league leader in accepted penalties?
Yep.
Tied for the league.
Yikes.
Oh, my God. 13. And that was an aberration. He's been around 7 most of the time. But overall, I think your contribution from Carlton Davis was good. He led the league in second in the league in yards, walked off against him, too. But between Davis and Gonzalez at corner, Marcus Jones, who is certainly a borderline Pro Bowl level slot corner, Woodson, who played brilliantly down the stretch, and all-pro in Byard, it would be hard to argue that they're not. And I really like the depth guys, too. I like Del Pettis. I think he's a good player. They did sign a corner, and his name is escaping me within the last 15 hours. But they need depth corners because Alex Austin, I believe, has gone to Miami. So Alex Austin, I think, took about 141 snaps last year. So you got to replace that depth, and I think that was addressed with some of the guys they brought in.
Tom, realistically, I saw he was getting in some work with some of his players and some college players. I think it was at Florida Atlantic University the other day. It was, all the aggregators and whatnot were covering it on Twitter, and there was a lot of hype about it and whatnot, but it's just someone working out in the offseason. But more to the point with Drake May, realistically, with Romeo Doubs and maybe adding A.J. Brown, and if they do what you and me and Ted Johnson hope they do in the draft and grab a young, versatile, athletic tight end, how much, by what percent would you say you could even almost expect Drake May's overall game to improve in year 3 with Vrabel and under McDaniels?
It was such a massive leap he took last year, and it's been such a massive leap he took April of 2024 to August of, 2024. And his rookie year was a drastic leap. So I think if you look at what May can expect, he should be a better player, a smarter player, a more decisive player, a guy who's got better ball security. He's going to go against a better schedule. That's the entire thing about this Patriots team. If you ask me how they're going to finish up, what's the total win-loss, I would say you got to have to come in where you came in last year, 9, maybe 10. And the reason being, they have a really difficult schedule. And I talked to Jason McCourty yesterday for the Patriots Talk podcast, and he said the same thing. People, when I was coming here from Cleveland, people were like, we're a big game for every single team that we play. He's like, oh, how much bigger can it be? And he found out when he got here that you get everyone's best shot. And the Patriots are going to get everyone's best shot. And I remember in 2002, they got everybody's best shot. And it was a very difficult season for them to deal at that time with a roster that was still forming after that 2001 Super Bowl, to deal with everyone's best shot every week. They got better at it, obviously, but it did take some time for them to adjust to the intensity of the week in, week out being a circled opponent. So that's a long way of saying Drake May is going to be better than he was last year. I just would hesitate with the schedule and the amped up competition to say he's going to have another MVP level season.
Yeah, it's only going to get more difficult because, like you said, last year they were everyone's darling. Oh my goodness, look at the way Mike Vrabel and company have turned it around from 4-13 to 14-3. Well, now they're a Super Bowl competitor, and they're going to have a big, broad bullseye on their back. But at the same time, they've had a great offseason to date, and we will look forward to keeping track of what they do